waking as I have died, I saw also the Lord sitting on a throne. I am lifted up, and his train filled the temple. Above it stood the seraphim, each one had 6 wings. He covered his face with wings. He covered his feet with wings. He did fly. And one cried to another and said,
Hello, good day. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today our study in the book of Job, chapter 38. We read all the way to the end yesterday. We're just going to read chapter 38 today and hopefully get to the end of it as far as textual analysis. Let's go with verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, Who is this that darkeneth counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up now thy loins like a man, for I will demand of thee, and answer thou me. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? Declare if thou hast understanding. Who hath laid the measures thereof, if thou knowest? Or who hath stretched the line upon it? Whereupon are the foundations thereof fastened? Or who hath laid the cornerstone thereof? When the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who hath shut up the sea with doors, when it brake forth, as if it had issued out of the womb? When I made the cloud the garment thereof, and thick darkness a swaddling band for it, and break up for it my decreed place, and set bars and doors, and said, Hitherto shalt thou come, but no further, and here shall thy proud waves be stayed. Hast thou commanded the morning since thy days, and caused the dayspring to know his place, that it might take hold of the ends of the earth, that the wicked might be shaken out of it? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. And from the wicked their light is withholden, and the high arm shall be broken. Hast thou entered into the springs of the sea? Or hast thou walked in search of the depth? Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? Or hast thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Hast thou perceived the breath of the earth? Declare if thou knowest it all. Where is the way where light dwelleth? And as for darkness, where is the place thereof? That thou shouldest take it to be bound thereof. That thou shouldest take it to the bound thereof. That thou shouldest know the paths to the house thereof. Knowest thou it because thou wast then born? Or because the number of thy days is great? Hast thou entered into the treasure of the snow? Or hast thou seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war? By what way is light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? Who hath divided a watercourse for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder, to cause it to rain on the earth, where no man is, on the wilderness, where there is no man, to satisfy the desolate and waste ground, and to cause the bud of the tender herb to spring forth? Hath the rain a father? Or who hath begotten the drops of dew? Out of whose womb came the ice, and the hoary frost of heaven? Who hath gendered it? The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Canst thou bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or canst thou guide Arcturus with his sons? Knowest thou the ordinances of heaven? Canst thou set the dominion thereof in the earth? Canst thou lift up thy voice to the clouds, that abundance of waters may cover thee? Canst thou send lightnings, that they may go and say unto thee, Here we are? Who hath put wisdom in the inward parts? Or who hath given understanding to the heart? Who can number the clouds in wisdom? Who can stay the bottles of heaven? When the dust groweth into hardness, and the clods cleave fast together. Wilt thou hunt the prey for the lion, or fill the appetite of the young lions, when they couch in their dens, and abide in the covert to lie in wait? Who provideth for the raven his food? When his young ones cry unto God, they wander for lack of meat. I'm going to keep reading a little bit, just because Well, knowest thou the time when the wild goats of the rock bring forth? Or canst thou mark when the hinds do calve? Canst thou number the months that they fulfill? Or knowest thou the time when they bring forth? And he goes on much like manner. I think we will stop there. We read the whole thing yesterday, and I re-listened, and I was not awful. I was like, oh, not awful. It was in too many blunders. But let's go, there is something to be gained here, I think, in terms of, one, I was going to look at it symbolically, because some of these animal references, there's no way they're just like, oh, look at some random animal. That's it. There's no way that's why it's there. Like, even if you weren't, even for someone who was skeptical, if I look like there we go, that's better. Even for someone who's skeptical, like if you think, when someone thinks, oh, the Bible is wholly the product of man, there's no divine spark involved at all, which is definitely not my school of thought. I believe those scriptures are inspired. That doesn't mean some of the things that people derive from it. That doesn't mean therefore we ought to take them literally. It's like, whoa, wait, it's like, maybe not. Not all the time. Sometimes it's like to know when to zig and zag. There's a time for every purpose under heaven, Sometimes things are symbolic. Sometimes things are literal. And, the wise need to discern the difference. So, there's some... we can certainly, and that's where the layers of meaning come in. My old teacher, Arnold Murray, who I reject now, but he used to talk about layers of meaning. And he never really laid it out properly, but I get it. It's like sometimes there's a very surfacey, literal meaning that you can derive meaning from. And then there's also a symbolic meaning. And sometimes, the literal is very small, as far as the impact that it really has. It's the symbolic, like the baskets that Jesus took up, or that the disciples took up when they fed the 5,000. As a literal event, it's kind of a small detail, right? But what it symbolized, that was something significant. And Jesus points that out. Beware the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Whenever you have these multitudes, it comes out. The false teachings of mainstream Christianity is what I look at it. My opinion is when I go out there and I start thinking about these things. I was thinking today, I was meditating on this again, because this pastor was saying, he was talking about how we ought to, like Jesus said, he says, give to him and ask at all these things that you should do. It's a very high bar, right? And we should do those things. But at the conclusion of his sermon, trying to urge people to help one another, he said, you don't have to do any of that. And I'm like, I know what he means. He means in order to be technically saved. because like the thief on the cross, blah, 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 blah. These technicalities are not the way you should go at these things. It's like my sons, my daughter, my children, they don't have to obey me in order to be my children. But since they're my children, they have to obey me. And that's how it is. Since I'm the son, since I'm a servant of Jesus Christ, I'm his, disciple, I believe in him. I'm his, what do we call it? Precisely. Well, I believe in him. I'm his. That's you can end it right there. I belong to him. I'm his servant. I'm supposed to be. To whatever degree that is profitable or unprofitable to him, he will judge. He will ultimately judge that, and and that's what we have to all face. And here's the thing: it's like, and God is our Father by adoption, and he looks upon us graciously because we believe upon his Son. And so, you're not worried about wrath and all that stuff. That's not the point. Like the wrath of hell, fire, and damnation. I don't worry about damnation. I worry about disappointing my Father. I worry about not living up to the expectations I know he has for me. And to tell people that they don't have to meet those expectations is it's false, and it will lead people down a path to destruction. Because whosoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them not is like someone building his house on the sand. You try to go along with technicalities and all that. You don't live it at all. Like I say, I'm not saying you have to live it perfectly. I'm just saying, like, live it. Of course. Like they all say, he said, you'll want to, but you don't have to. It's like, why undercut it like that? Yeah, I know you don't technically have to, but that fact doesn't come out in any of the teachings. They're always more apt to warn. Let us not tempt Christ as they tempted. It's Satan who wants you to leap off the temple thinking I'll just take it all literal. Yeah, I won't do anything Jesus commanded. I'll just trust that believing that he is in charge is going to be enough for my salvation. I'm gonna prove a point. I thank God I can't really imagine anyone doing that, but their rhetoric puts people down the primrose path to nominal Christianity and destruction. Where it's like in name only, Christian in name only, in lifestyle, in belief. Why do you think our society is crumbling? It's because we're filled with Christians who've been told from their youth, you don't really have to do all these things. It's totally optional. It's like I have a lot of things in my life with my children. They're not optional. You will do these things. You will speak the truth. You will learn to speak the truth. You will be punished if you don't. And ultimately when they grow up, they follow their own path. But the scripture does say if you train them up in the way that is right, but there are prodigals out there. But I generally think, I don't know. Anyways, so let's go look at the text. I've been riffing off of it. We're picking up at verse 14. But first of all, let's recap a little bit. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Here's the thing. From what I understand in the scriptures, I didn't exist yet, except that from the beginning, in the determinate counsel and foreknowledge of God, everything that was going to come into being sort of had a being in his foreknowledge and counsel. And that, that we exist in potential. I believe in that kind of thing. I don't think that's like a tenet of faith. It's just something that seems to me obvious from just the nature of reality. So where were you? Well, I didn't exist. Maybe I was just, when you were laying the foundations of the world, you're also laying the foundations for my existence. Like it says, when Paul encounters the tough question of hey, if God, if he knows everything beforehand, why does he yet find fault? For who has resisted his will? I want to know the exact wording on that. I just remember from why does he yet find fault? I don't know why Romans 9 is suddenly becoming like difficult for me to remember. But it is a very important point. Well, you will say to me in Romans 9:19, why does he yet find fault? For who hath resisted his will? Who can resist God? How can he find fault with me? And there it is on screen. And it says, Nay, but, O man, who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, why hast thou made me thus? And a lot of times people do not understand that verse and what the implications are. Because like I said, if God does it, it's something you should meditate on. The thought like, why did you make me this way? If I was made differently. Have you ever seen twins? Identical twins. They're almost exact copies of each other genetically, yet they are distinct people. I mean, and such a small difference between two people makes someone entirely different. And it is sort of a folly to reply to God and say, why did you do me this way? It's because you come in you are you. I insist on that. You don't come in some other package. That's somebody else. People like to deny their identity of who they are. No, you are that person. You are you. Who you've been and what you've done, that's you. It sticks to you. And all we've done will stick to us, to our bones, unless by the blood of Jesus you have your sins washed away. Everything is there. Even so, we should not look to God and say, like, well, why did you make me thus? Because ultimately that's questioning your own existence, which is, it's folly. It's understandable on a certain level because we are perplexing to ourselves. I don't have free will. I have me will. That's why I look to God and say, why am I this way? I don't say, why did you make me this way? Because I understand that. I do say to God, I often pray, God, why am I this way? I don't blame you for it. I blame me for it. You know what I mean? I don't blame God for the ways I am. That's me. You know what I mean? He could have made somebody else somebody better. But no, he decided he wanted one of me. Well, hallelujah. Thank God for that. I'll take it. If he accepts me in my imperfection, well, But the point is, though he accepts us in our imperfections and has made us accepted without us having to do any works, yet we become his workmanship. And his glory is in that work that is done in us. So people say, you'll want to do God's will. Well, what if you don't want to do God's will and you never do God's will? What's that a sign of? If you continually live in defiance, it's like they don't want to say because they want people to come back. I get it. I don't like to be condemning. But facts are facts. You can't tempt the Lord your God. I mean, you can try, but it's folly. Thou shalt not. So, in this ancient, we talked about the morning stars issue and all that. We can get distracted by angels and stuff and what angels were up to, but it's like, what am I up to? You know what I mean? So we may be confronted with angels again. Okay, well, how are you doing with being confronted with non-angelic powers? If you have run with the footmen and they have wearied you, how shalt thou contend with horses? If in the land of peace you can't handle the trouble that's come, well, what are you going to do when things are falling to pieces? And that's a paraphrase, that second part especially. But if the footmen have wearied thee, if you can't, if the temptations of now, do you think it's going to get better? A lot of people think, well, we won't be around. As Christians in America, kind of ignorantly just kind of cheer on the butchery of Christians in Gaza and in the West Bank. Like I said, it's not all Muslims, and it doesn't matter. They certainly are not Amalek and all that stuff. But this, but that. So like when you look at clerics, it's like when you look at Christian, when I look at Christian pastors, I feel zero affinity with a lot of these TV guys and the radio guys and the internet guys. And I'm like, okay, so I don't want to have my entire religion judged on Kenneth Copeland, and so should, some, I don't even know what to call their teachers, some Islamic teacher, because he says this, that means everyone who believes that, it's like, You don't look at people based on their group identity. You look at them based on their individual identity. And, that's best. So, has a command of the morning since, he gets into, one, where were you, when I did all these things and I did all this and I set all these boundaries? Have you commanded the morning since have you had this power since your days? Since, what does that imply? The Lord, he has no beginning of days or end of years. That's how it is understood. He is from everlasting. And he commands all the powers of nature that we think of as these fixed things like morning and evening. It doesn't matter how it really works, because the point is it's all been set in order. It does work. It's a very orderly, understandable, and predictable universe. That's why I tell people, it's like, when people talk about flat Earth, I'm like, why do the people who use telescopes and have round Earth, why do they have astronomical calendars that can predict the positions of every star, every planet, every moon? All these things can be predicted using the models that we are familiar with since the days of Newton and such. I mean, going back even further, but I think especially of Newton because of because that's really where physics got established at least in the basics. And so that it might take hold in there, that the wicked might be shaken out of it. Because, with the coming of the dawn, remember, it talked about this earlier in Job. I forgot who said it when, but like that when, those who love darkness, men love darkness rather than light because their deeds are evil. So, when the sun rises, the light goes to the very corners of everything and shines a light in the dark places. And that's why, the idea of the day star and the morning star, it's important as an analogy of Christ. But the fact that Satan, Lucifer, it uses that title and is even called that in the scriptures, like in Isaiah 14 that I was talking about yesterday, it's important to understand that because he imitates it. It is no marvel. The fault, if the servants of, it says that the servants of the devil are disguised as the servants of righteousness, or it says transformed. But that's, depends on your translation, but it means basically disguised. And no marvel, for Satan himself is disguised as an angel of light. He pretends to be the angel of light, the light bringer, Halel ben Shakar, bright star, son of the dawn, Lucifer, son of the morning star. He is not the morning star, but he wants to stand in the temple of God, in the place of God, showing the world that he is God. That's what Revelation says. That's the ultimate form of Antichrist. There are many Antichrists, but the ultimate form is that which seeks its self-worship through its own, that when one individual aggregates that much power and such, that is the form it takes. They start playing God. Anyways, but the light goes to the ends of the earth that the wicked might be shaken out of it, that they might be exposed, because ultimately, right? It is turned as clay to the seal, and they stand as a garment. We're going to have to look at another translation for that verse. But first impressions, clay to the seal. Well, if you have a seal, I think of seals as having wax, but you could have a clay seal, I suppose. Then you seal it it would still make an imprint, and when it dries, if it's broken, then the seal is broken. You know that there's been a breach. But let's see what it says in the NIV or one of the other translations. I'll use the NIV since it's very popular. And it's not a bad satanic translation. I'm just kidding. I said sometimes they interpret a little more. That's helpful sometimes because the interpretation of a scholar, I don't discount that as worthless. I don't automatically accept it. And that's why I don't use it as my base text for understanding. I use a more translation as opposed to one that's more interpreted. So what verse are we in? 14. The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Its features stand out like those of a garment. So, let me see. That it might take the earth by the edges and shake the wicked out of it. Have you ever given the orders to the morning to show the dawn its place? So the sun's coming up. It's taking the earth by the edges. It's shaking the wick out of it. The earth takes shape like clay under a seal. Well, I guess, you know what? In the low light, it makes sense in the sense of just like observational. In low light, things have less detail. This is not a like earth-shattering or weird. Like that's why well, certainly in the dark you can't see anything, right? But as the light lowers, like at sunset, when the sun goes down and that light's low, things have there's less contrast and things become harder to see. So it's like, you know, shapeless clay suddenly taking on this really defined shape, like when you press a seal into something and you pull it out and you say, oh, look at that relief. There's like all these edges and stuff. And so that's what it's saying. The earth takes shape when the light shines upon it, and its features stand out like those of a garment. Well, I mean, I guess, you know, just like with a garment, there are, I mean, certainly when you look at it, it's like, well, there's where the arms go, there's where the legs go. And that maybe in the sense of the features. I'm not sure why a garment, well, you know, but just like when light is shined on it, it's sort of seen as like, oh, what a fabulous garment. I think the idea is that like the light, like a garment spread upon the morning. I know that's been said before, so maybe, you know, like a garment spread over, it causes the features to stand out. It's more like the way I want to think about it. It's like, well, whatever. That's all fine. It's the idea that the features are being compared to a fine garment, I would assume. Like not just any garment, not just something, but like something that like, look at that. That's obviously, you know, whatever it is. So, the wicked are denied their light and their upraised arm is broken. That's what it says in the NIV. And what did it say in the King James? It says here, and the wicked, their light is withholden. Sure. And their high arm shall be broken. And again, we still use these idioms to this day. What does it mean? To have the upper hand, right? The high arm. Our hand is high, and the Lord has not done all this. Deuteronomy 32. The idea is having the upper hand. Simple. So it's the same thing here. Their upper hand shall be broken. They think they have the upper hand. The wicked do. You know, and just like as it was saying in the forehand, Job was saying, sometimes the wicked, they live this long life and they seem to die in peace. And it's like, you know, but again, you have to trust in the judgment of God and the power of God, who from the beginning hath wrought all these things, that the one who is wise enough to make the world as you see it, and it still works and it's still progressing and it's still ticking along, to trust to know that, like, you know what? Like I said, they talk about the problem of evil, and I say, well, what about the problem of good? There's way too much good in the world and potential for good for it to be like, oh, God is evil. It's like, no. If God exists, no. And randomness and nothingness brings about nothingness. The idea that there's no purpose or anything behind all of this is just a deceit and a lie from Satan to get people to become apathetic and not think that anything they do matters, when the things you do matter. Especially when you start to think they don't. You know? What you do in secret. What we're willing to do in secret when we think nobody's watching. When we think there's no God. What do you get into? You know? That's why the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So it's a smart thing to take heed to that, because you know what? The judge stands at the door. I don't care what you say or what you think. He does. And how we live our lives does matter. What you believe in is important, yes. But I don't think the content of your faith is, it's like, well, I believe Jesus and the Trinity, and I believe in the resurrection, and also that you can, I was going to say something really bad, like, the R word or something. You can murder, with impunity. There we go. Obviously some things are incompatible, right? We can't just kill people. Of course not. That's not compatible with Christianity. Oh, but you don't have to do anything God says. You can still be saved. Grace will just abound and abound. And that's the thing, is like, it's even, there's a disclaimer. It's already in there. There's a disclaimer saying, like, hey, don't do that. Don't go that direction. No. It's a wonderful thing that we can't, that he's paid the price. I don't have to worry about my salvation or anything like that. But I certainly want to please him. What are you, nuts? And that's what it's like. They're nuts. It's like, who hath seduced you? What devil has whispered in your ears? It doesn't matter what you do. Just do whatever. Have another sleeve of Oreos. No wonder your children are slackers. When you raise them that way. Hey, if nothing matters, and who cares? Why try? Why work at it? It does matter. Like I said, it's like, my children don't have to obey me to be my children, but they're darn well going to obey me. Or I do not wear the belt in vain. You know what I mean? That's the thing. If I'm going to obey God, or he's going to get his belt out and he's going to whoop me because he's my father by adoption. And if that doesn't happen, if I defy him and he doesn't whoop me, then I'm just a bastard and he has nothing to do with me. And that is so are all. God, that's a judge not that you be not judged. The Lord do so to me. I've always submitted to God's judgment. I know where it is. I was like, we submit ourselves to him. And he is there to help and to guide us and all those things. He's not there for judgment and condemnation and all that stuff. But on the other hand, it's like, please, people, let us urge each other to better efforts, not to slovenly, wicked tempting of the Lord, to say, I do nothing you command. What? I almost can't believe that these are the things I hear preached. It's like, and it doesn't surprise me that it comes from whatever. It's going to be insulting, but I don't want to. Because that should be better than that. No, but part of me, it's like when I see Satan invading people's minds like that, and to undermine that desire they have to do things and to obey and to be a Christian, as as much as it lies within their power. And why would they undermine that? Couldn't tell you. Ultimately, the wicked is, interesting. The light comes and it reveals things, but the wicked, they don't have light anymore. How does that work? What's that mean? The true light comes and they are suddenly in darkness. And I think of it as like, the light is that which guides you. You know what I mean? Like if I'm in darkness and I use a light, I can see where I'm going and I can be guided by it, right? Well, the wicked love darkness because their deeds are evil and they want to hide their deeds from others. But also, as they're navigating those spaces, very often, and I know because I have criminal family history, they think they're quite clever. That's why, wise guys. They're wise guys. They're smart. They know. They know more than you do. They're more clever than you. They know how the world really works. And this is exactly how they think. I know how things really are. It's like, I know how it really is. I've got the real light of the world in the sense, not the light of the world in terms of John, but like that worldly light, which guides me in my treachery. You know what I mean? when there's a conspiracy, there's light between the conspirators, but they do it in darkness. You know what I mean? They've lit their candle in the dark room and shut out all the light from other places lest they be seen, lest the light come out. They put their light under a bushel to keep it dampened down, but they have a light. And so anyways, at least as far as symbolically, I think that's an interesting way to think about it. The idea of their light being withholden, but in the sense of that, like, if their light is that sort of inverse light, when you expose it to the true light, the all-encompassing light, it becomes useless. That secret treachery is exposed. Now they're exposed. It's like they scurry for the darkness. And their advantage, their upper hand, is worthless when the light is shined, exposing their wicked deeds. And that can be temporarily. Sometimes that works out when justice is served, when the light is shined on the dark deeds of the evil things that are going on, whether it be in government and whatever, or in criminal activities. But then there's also spiritual light, in the sense of like, the darkness that seeks to hide from God, the mind that doesn't want to acknowledge the Maker, that wants to flee from Him because our deeds. We seek the darkness. Rather, we don't want to live like that. That's no way to live. Not as a Christian. We must love the light and seek and come to the light. We come to light to have our deeds, to have them brought to light. Everything's going to come to light anyways. So, it's like, you can either have this secret life, I'm in my little tent here, and in my tent I got my secrets. I got my secret here. I got my money stashed here. I got this, my little secret little tent with my light, my light, my light. And then all of a sudden the sun shines brightly and all my secrets are done in. Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? What's that mean? Well, in the sense of, I think in the sense of like, what did Jesus say? It was interesting because these are referenced. There are things here referenced in the gospel, which I think is interesting. There's a lot of messianic stuff in Job, and I'm always looking for that because, as I say, the other thing, the testimony of Jesus, the spirit of prophecy, the Old Testament, I'm looking for that connection. The springs of the sea. Now, people talk, I remember hearing, well, we found the springs in the sea, we blah, blah, blah. It's like, but the point is, it's like, yeah. Okay, but all of it. Some of this stuff, obviously, people will have access to. They know the courses of something or other. They know when the animals do this, okay? And the point is, it's like, do you have all knowledge? Have you been to the gates of death? He talked about Peter having the keys of the kingdom. Jesus has the keys of hell and death. And of the keys of hell and death, write the things which thou hast seen, the things which are. The Son of Man, He has the keys of hell and the keys of death. What does that mean? So the idea of the gates of death is the idea of a gate that keeps people in the state of death. It holds them in, right? Like the graveyard gates, it keeps the graves in there. They don't come, but just like that, they are held in. The gates of death and hell, the grave and death. It's meant to be all-encompassing, those two terms. And He has the keys of hell and death, and therefore, the idea of opening them is the idea of resurrection. I can see it as nothing else. The idea of the gates of death being opened so that you could come out and rise from the dead as Jesus Christ did. To Him, the gates of death were opened. Why? Because He had the keys. Symbolically, He had the keys to death. Death could not hold Him. He had done no wrong. A righteous man cannot suffer death ultimately. He can suffer it, but he cannot stay dead. He can taste death, but he cannot see it. In that, when you want to nuance that out, don't get too caught up on the semantics of it, but there is a semantic shift in the idea of tasting and seeing death. There's a truly experiencing death as it is, the permanent lights out that represents the blackness of darkness forever, versus just taking a nap, or like it's actually more like having anesthesia. Which is encouraging, because that means when you're dead, you won't even remember the passage of time. Of course not. Have the gates of death been opened unto thee? Well, not yet for me. But for the Lord Jesus, yes, they have been. Have thou seen the doors of the shadow of death? Have you even been there? Like, that makes me think of near-death experiences, which I'll comment on slightly because we're here talking about the doors of death. I don't totally discount them. I just don't believe they are actually death experiences. They are near-death experiences. And can God speak to someone through a near-death experience? You bet they can, just like through a dream or anything else. But the point is, they're nearly dead. I will not ascribe to the medical community, and anyone out there who's familiar with the medical community, I know we have people who are, understands that the doctors do not raise the dead. They can't. They can't bring people back to life who are truly dead. And these near-death experiences, these are people they go into cardiac arrest, and it's like all very close to being dead. They're nearly dead. They're like, this guy's dead. His heart stopped. They may say such things, and they are, I know someone who was brought back from cardiac arrest, and it is not just nothing. I mean, it's a big deal. And so when you go through something like that, it's like, God may speak to you as you get close to death. And you better listen. But do I think that, all those experiences, when you take them on the whole, they're varied. They're varied. There's a lot of different experiences. Sometimes the little kids in these near-death experiences, this is, I have heard, and I hope this is not misinformation, but because I don't utter it lightly, but I've heard that some children have had near-death experiences where the one on the throne is Santa Claus. And honestly, like, I had a dream as a child where I met my creator and he was a mad scientist, and there's no reason to think that God wasn't in it. As far as that goes. But I don't, dogmatize over it and get it. You don't want to be overly dogmatic about dreams and visions. It's because it's something that's I tend to think of it as very personal, unless explicitly otherwise. Unless God gives you a vision that's wider, obviously, like this is for the people, or, it would be revealed in that way. I would think you would know that this is not just for me, because most of the things I've experienced, it's mostly just things that have built up my faith. And while I'd like to do things for other people, I'm still grateful at all the Lord does on my behalf. Because I need every bit of help I can get. That's why. Have the gates of death been opened unto you? Have you seen the shadow of death? The doors of the shadow of death. You getting close to death? You ever been there? Have you perceived the breath of the earth? We talked about that. I said, I almost want to can I search for, I almost want to see if I can do it real quick here. Let me see. What would be the search term? It'd be like, wrong keyboard. That's just a problem. Let's see. H-shaped blocks 1 meter. Not eternity meter. It's Pumapunku in Bolivia. There are these H-shaped blocks. I'll bring it up on, which I think is interesting. Oh, wrong thing, Paul. There we go. This is all correct. So there we go. The AI overview sometimes is quite helpful. And they got exactly what I want. H-shaped blocks that are 1 meter. Those are the blocks. There are a lot of documentaries on this. It's interesting because they are, when exactly they're made. They're very smooth. They're very precise. This explains right here, this text on the thing. It's like these blocks made of andesitic volcanic stone are characteristic by their smooth finishes, precisely cut 90-degree angles, and the ability to interlock like a puzzle. They're approximate feature of the site and have sparked much debate, discussion about the construction techniques, and also the fact they're in around 1 meter. They're within a thousandth of a millimeter of a meter, I believe, or a thousandth of a meter, which would be. But they're very. It was like it was like meter point 0.99998 or something. It was something like that. It was really close, all of them. And if you know anything about the meter. What is the basis of the meter? Oh, well, that's not right. Metric meter basis. The metric system, the meter is the base unit for length. It is. Let's try Earth. Circumference. What's up, Kevin? Oh. Don't know. Not sure what to make of that. Okay, so Earth circumference. See, the meter is based on the circumference of the Earth. The Earth's circumference is like that, and the measurement is based on the Earth's equatorial diameter. The meter was originally defined as 1/10,000,000th of the distance from the North Pole to the equator along the meridian passing through Paris. This definition established a direct link between the meter and the Earth's circumference, making the Earth's polar, blah, blah, blah. What's fascinating, like I said, these blocks from ancient times are metric, which implies they knew something about the circumference of the Earth. Okay? But the point is, like, do I know anything about it? Nah, I'm an ignoramus. I don't know. I'm not a total ignoramus, but when it comes to things like that, yeah, I don't know the circumference of the Earth. And even if I had a number for it, because it does say it was 40,000 kilometers or so, right? I can hardly visualize or truly understand that massiveness of the Earth. The fact we can't see the curvature. We can't. Well, you can if you're in the right position, but generally speaking, I look around, everything looks, it's so big. The world that God has made is so big, and we are so small. Do you know it all, though? Yeah, we know the breadth of the earth. We can look it up on Wikipedia. But if you walked on the seafloor, as I say, like, these are things I want to do, like living forever, sure. But I want to, like, climb the ice sheets of Neptune and stuff. Maybe as long as it's possible. But like the idea of a universe of possibilities. It's amazing. You think about like how big all creation is and what the new heavens and the new earth that God will create. Like, who can even imagine what that may be like? Where is the way where the light dwelleth? Like what, in a sense, like how does light work? Now, we know a lot about that today, right? We've learned a lot. We understand how light interacts with things, but, how, as an individual man, how well do you understand it? And even when we take out our textbooks and blah, 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 we have an explanation. It's not about the God of the gaps, like I said many times. It's not. It's more of an atheism of the gaps. Like, as long as we can fill in these gaps, we can continue to deny God. Because as long as we have an explanation how things mechanically work, because like I've said for a long time, and I continually repeat, that God has made the world in such a way that it's possible to doubt Him, and for the wicked to believe, I can get away with it, and that's not entirely, it's not entirely. Unintentional. That's the word I wanted. As for darkness, where's the place thereof? How place of darkness? It may seem it's not nonsense. It's like, but from a human perspective, It's not that God's trying to impart scientific knowledge to Job. He's telling Job things you don't know about this stuff, and it should resonate with Job like, I don't know. And that's all. It doesn't have to be, oh, darkness has a place. And, it's like, no. Like, how does it really all work? That you should take it to the bound thereof. And then you should know the paths to the house thereof. When you think about the universe and like all the lights and like, but then like the darkness, like I said, we live in this humongous black box. I mean, it might as well be a literal cube because everywhere in every direction, it's darkness. And so what? And so what is there? Like this is, it's like space is expanding. And so outside of space, there is that stuff. So again, let's just know the paths to the house thereof. To go to the boundary, to the outermost darkness, or to the ultimate light. And also the idea of the way where light dwelleth, it implies that the light has a path, it travels. It travels on a path, because it's understood that light does sort of have a traveling thing, and that's not inaccurate, but that's just observational. And like I said, it's not about creating a scientific model of the universe. It's about man standing in awe of the Creator. And in the ultimate answer, of course, to Job's problem is that, like, you know what? You don't have all the answers. You're right to trust. And don't think you're more just than God just because you don't understand why things happen. There's a lot of things we don't understand. And that's what he's saying. It's like, there's so much you don't understand, Job. And while I'm not necessarily going to give you a satisfactory, and we know why it happened. But also, like, okay, but in it, like I said, there's the purpose, as Jesus delineated, as Jesus said when he talked about the man born blind, for God's glory. And if you're a servant of God, that should be something that appeals to you. Because when I bring God glory, that is something that they like when my children bring me glory. It makes me very happy. I don't need it. I don't live vicariously through my children's glories. Like, I don't need them to do well in things. As far as, like, for me to feel good about myself. Like, I don't need, like, my children, they gotta accomplish these things, or I'm gonna feel like I've never done anything. No, that's for me to do. I have my own challenges. I don't lay that on them. I don't lay my ambitions or my things that I care about on them. They do it for them. But when they do well, I receive it. You know what I mean? Like, because in the sense of, like, I want them to do those good things, and I'm overjoyed when they do those things that are good and right in the sight of the Lord, Of course. And the Lord also, and for them, is it grievous to do those things which please me? No. It should not be grievous for anyone to do those things which please the Lord. Not ultimately. The true grief comes from sin and from the torment that sin can bring. No, the plans to the house thereof. No, knowest thou it because thou was then born, or because the number of thy days is great. Again, he's not saying that this is all, Job, you don't know anything. No, he's saying, you may know some of this, but do you know it because you were born when it happened? Like what I know about the universe, like, oh, the Big Bang. Do I have that knowledge because I was born when it happened? Was I there? Do I have firsthand knowledge? That's why you can be skeptical of science to some degree, because when you think about it, 100 years ago, things have changed. Things do not all stay the same. So you have to maintain, while at the same time you got to be reasonable. You don't want to be like just, like a complete, off the deep end, rejecting all knowledge we have gained from observing the world. Remember, knowledge gains from observing the world. This is God's world. He's saying, do you know these things? I'm showing you these things. These things exist. What can you say about them? Can you answer? What do you know? Do you know everything? Is it because you were old or because you were born long ago? Is that why you know things? Have you entered into the treasures of the snow? Or have you seen the treasures of the hail? That's prophetic because of the seventh trump and the seventh vial. The last plague is great hailstones. Reserved against the day of battle and war. Yeah, Armageddon, man. The time of trouble, the day of tribulation, in prophesied even in Job. I said, when like I said, Revelation is like, if I was skeptical, I'd say it's a love letter to the Old Testament prophets and things like Job. Even the poetic books concerning the Psalms are considered prophetic, and certainly Job is. I'm reading through it again here. At this date, it certainly has reinforced that in my mind, the prophetic nature of this book and the inspired nature of the book. There's certainly something here. A bit of understanding to be gained. Which I have reserved against the time of trouble, against the day of battle and war. By what way is the light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? I wonder what they say in the NIV for that, verse 24. It says, right there. What is the way to the place where the lightning is dispersed? Oh, yeah, instead of lightning, because it means light, or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth. Who cuts a channel for the torrents of rain and a path for the thunderstorms? That's interesting. What is the way to the place where lightning? What way is light parted, which scattereth the east wind upon the earth? And then they say, not which scattereth. The lightning is dispersed. So it's just contained together. Or the place where the east winds are scattered over the earth. What? By what way the light parted? Light is, let's see. Scatters like to pieces, the east wind, the day of the east wind. Now, the east wind is something that comes up prophetically a few times, like Isaiah 27, in the day of the east wind. The east wind was, from what I understand, reading in, I think it was like the Bible dictionary, is a hot wind. Or maybe it was from Bullinger's Companion Bible Notes. A hot wind that had a tendency to, be rough on crops in the sense of like, that's not good. It's hot and dry, the east wind. Now, where I live, when the east wind blows, it's usually wet and miserable or snowy. It's like when it blows from the east. And that's the thing, is often east wind is contrary to the, because the earth is spinning, and the way the winds work is it's usually, going from, the weather comes from west to east, right? As the earth spins. But sometimes it swirls around, right? And it gets rotating, and that often is part of a storm and stuff. And so when it's blowing from the east, often that means there's something is kicking around. Especially from the southeast, that usually means something's coming up warm against the cold front and all that, the weather. Anyway, so that's part of the things that he says, about the weather, and these things that we have very little, we know a bit about. I don't know that the light... First I thought about light parted, I thought about the fact that sunlight has a lot to do with the way wind works. But that may be me just reading into this, my scientific understanding of the idea of wind. That may not have been at all. Maybe it is all about lightning. But as far as like scattering the east wind, that doesn't make much sense with lightning, right? But in the sense of like light and wind, as far as being, if they understood too much light and sunlight and sunshine being part of a drought condition, maybe that has something to do with it as far as the east wind. But he moves on immediately to the who hath divided the water course for the overflowing of waters, or a way for the lightning of thunder. And again, these things work a certain way. How does it work that electricity can pass through the sky? The conductive nature of these things. We have a better understanding, but most of us as lay people don't. We don't know. We're still as ignorant as Job. Just because there are specialists who know a lot of these things. There's specialists who know about the circumference of the earth. There's specialists who know about the stars and the sun and the moon. But who knows it all? Well, the Lord only. To cause it to rain, where even man, it rains even where people aren't. If a tree in the woods falls, does it make a noise? Yes, because the Lord hears it. Okay? And so it rains where people aren't. Because people are not the only observers. That's what's wrong with science. One of its foundational assumptions is wrong. That all observers share the same objective reality. God is an observer who does not share the same objective reality that you and I do. I do not think he is confined to the objective reality that we are, which is our eyes and ears and senses tell us is real. That is not a very reliable thing. And God is not on that. He's not limited to those things. I don't know exactly where his ways are. That's, part of our ignorance. This water comes. So even, and again, God blesses. He rains on the just and the unjust. He rains on all places. Even those things, there are things he's taking care of that we aren't even conscious of, is what he's saying. It's like, I'm taking care of things that are beyond your knowledge all the time, satisfying desolate and waste places, causing the bud to come forth. Who is the father of the rain? It's a rhetorical question. Have the rain a father? No, the rain doesn't have a father, but it comes from somewhere. I mean, just from the sky. It's like the fact that we live on a planet where precipitation works, because it doesn't work on every planet. And the moon doesn't have rain to bring forth green things and all these things. These things are very specific. We live on a very specifically habitable planet. It's very, I would say it's very suggestive. It doesn't prove God's existence, but it's sort of like, like a lot of things. I don't believe in proving God's existence. It's sort of ridiculous. I had an experience where I received power from God, and that doesn't prove he exists. It's just, for me personally, I know something happened. But it's enough to convince me I'd be a fool. I go seeking experience. Oh, Jesus, and then it happens, and I'd be like, it probably was nothing. Let's not be foolish. Out of whose womb came the ice? Okay, that immediately made me think of my dad's song, Stone Cold Wife. But out of whose womb came the ice is like a funny thing, because that implies quite a cold experience. The hoary frost of heaven, who hath gendered it? Who gave birth to these things? And again, it's a rhetorical question. Obviously, no one. Out of no one's womb came the ice. It's not out of someone's womb. God made it. He made the possibility of ice. You can't have ice everywhere. You can't have ice on Mercury. It didn't come from some man or from some woman. The waters are hid as with a stone, and the face of the deep is frozen. Well, when you have ice frozen over, then it may be a reference to things like, again, showing sort of this knowledge of far-reaching things, which, even as a skeptic, you would think, well, they would want to demonstrate this. And of course, when you have ice or on water, pack ice, it does hide the water as if it was covered by stone. You know what I mean? So that makes sense to me. The face of the deep is frozen. This is, and it's interesting because that wouldn't have been something Job was familiar with in his locality. But that shows, because I do believe this is a product of the time period of Job. It feels like that Bronze Age, Abraham, all that stuff. It feels like Abraham's time, okay? So, who knows? Maybe this is what Abraham had. One of the books he was walking around with. Okay, I'm not beyond fantasizing about that. I think that's an interesting thought. Can't prove it, doesn't matter. Just don't be dogmatic about it. Don't be dogmatic about things you don't know. like with the angels playing around and about what some of these things mean. You know, the waters are hid with a stone, the face of the deep is frozen. It seems pretty obvious. When ice, it's like a rock. Hey, right? Rock ice, we even call it sometimes, right? Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades? That's Pleiades, the 7 stars. The Pleiades. It's also, behold, the 7 stars in Orion shall not cause their light to shine. It's a reference to, or I'm referencing Isaiah 14. But it's an important constellation. It's mentioned several times in the Bible, also with Orion and similar, because they're a notable constellation. There are 7 stars like in a circle. The 7 sisters, though only 6 are visible now. In the past, some people think that the 7th was visible with the naked eye. It's just that it has grown dim since then, which shows how long ago that name was. The 7 sisters, or the 7 brothers, I forgot sisters or brothers, but the 7 of the Pleiades. It is the 7 stars. Like I said, you can only see 6. But in the past, it is very, like 12,000 years ago. Not like the past, like 100 years ago. I mean, long time ago. Canst thou bind the sweet influences of Pleiades or loose the bands of Orion? What does that mean, though? Like, what does that mean? Orion has his famous belt. I assume that's what it's talking about, the bands of Orion, his belt. And I suppose if there's more than one, it's the scabbard, right? His belt and his scabbard. We got to wrap this up. We're about there. Let me just look at the NIV here for verse 31. Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades, they say? Can you loosen Orion's belt? Okay, so it's not plural according to them. Can you bring forth... There's where the NIV translates it. That's fine. Oh, wait, what? It's not... didn't scroll down far enough. There we go. Can you bring forth the constellations in their seasons? Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades? What holds them together? Why are they there like that? What causes all these things to be fixed as they are? We know gravity, but, I've heard people talk about gravity power and gravity weapons and gravity this and that, but nobody's come up with anything. Can you loosen Orion's belt? Can you set those stars adrift? God can. Yes. He can make things appear the way they do and to disappear the way they may. Bring forth the constellations. All those things come forth the way they do. He brought it all into being. And lead out a bear with the cubs. I think he's probably referring to the bear constellation, just because it seems weird otherwise, right? The mom and the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper are supposed to be Ursa Major and Ursa Minor, the bear and her cubs. So I tend to think that's what this is talking about. Because otherwise, while it does talk about animals later, not right here. I mean, it does get to it pretty quick. But again, even so, like the idea is, things come forth in their season, the constellations. And yes, after a winter of hibernation, the bears come forth at the due season. So just like the constellations follow their seasons, the natural world follows its seasons, and human beings, there are also times for every season. So that's been clear. It's spoken of that way in Ecclesiastes, right? Let's see, we just got a couple more verses to look at here. Do you know the ordinances of heaven? And can you set the dominion thereof in the earth? That's important. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Can you make that happen? We can only pray. Jesus is coming to set the world on fire. And what will he do if it's already be kindled? But we can do but kindle. We can't burn it down. It won't go. We don't have the power. Ultimately, the Lord has to intervene. We cannot set the dominion here. We won't. But we are commanded to do so. And so I will die trying. That's it. Mazaroth in his season. What do they say for Mazaroth? Mazaroth, verse 32. All the constellations. That's just like the whole thing. the bear with its cubs, Mazzaroth. And they say Arcturus with his sons. Arcturus is an interesting constellation. The King James says Arcturus. They say the bear and the cubs. Either way, like I say, the takeaway is the same. It doesn't matter. You can name random constellations. The dragon, well, the dragon would be a little something different. The dragon's coming, though. And in fact, the constellations have a lot of animal symbols and stuff, and there's people who get into that and think that there's some sort of biblical connection. It's like, you can't really, what I would say is, well, that stuff's interesting. It definitely does not inform me of God's will. If anything, it's an interesting curiosity, but not something to guide my life by. And that's where where you'd want to draw the line. And getting into astrology, like the stars are telling you what to do. No. Now they're for signs and for seasons. It tells you when spring and summer and solstice and all that stuff. It's very useful. And they're helpful with navigation and all such things. Almost done here. Do you know how heaven works, and can you make the earth work just like it? Can you make those things which work perfectly above come down beneath? And again, the natural world is ordered properly, but something about the earth is broken, it seems. So we detect it. We think that the world, we think of this as, in the Christian sense, as a fallen world. And it's not wrong. It is not a world that is perfected, but one in which fault exists, sin, and good and evil are possible. But that also means that, like I said, that means I'm possible. So I'm on board for that. The consequences, okay, we'll have to deal with them as they come. But I want to be part of reality. I want to live. Can you lift up your voice to the clouds, that the abundance of waters may cover you? Can you cause it to rain, basically? Can you make it rain? No. Can you send lightnings, that they may go and say, that they can be your servants? Like say, here we are. I say to my servant, go, and he goes, and come, and he comes, and he reports back. That's the idea. It's like, are they your servants? Does all creation serve you the way it serves me? Who hath put wisdom in the inward part? Who made wisdom inside of man and given understanding to the heart? Again, he means it is I and none else. Who can number the clouds in wisdom? Or who can stay the bottles of heaven? Who can stop these things from being poured out? Who can number the things? What wisdom will cause? They can't be numbered because it's constantly changing. It can't be stopped because it's much bigger than man. When the dust groweth, the hardness, and the clouds cleave fast. When it's dry, that's what happens. Things get hard. The ground becomes hard. In August, you ever try to put a shovel in the ground? Sometimes it's like, literally, I've seen steel shovels bend, going just into normal dirt. Just break, because it's hard. It gets hard, baked like clay, yes. The clods cleave fast together. You have to break up the clods. It's helpful when it's wet. Are you going to go hunting for the lion? You going to make sure he has something to eat? You going to make sure that's all taken care of? And the young lions? That everything's working together. When they hide in their dens and they lie in wait, are you going to provide? Implication, God, all these things, the balance of nature, God has provided. And what of you, Job? What do you have to say? What do you know about what my plans are? What do you know about what I'm doing? It may not be satisfying to have a specific answer for every man. It's not always some sort of contest between God and Satan. But the Lord is faithful. That is ultimately the message. God provides for the beast. He will certainly provide for you. And he does not do injustice. That's the thing. We have an evil eye, and we look at God and we say, that's not fair. No, you have an evil eye. You have an evil eye. You're envious. You haven't taken the proper measure of things. God is fair. Oh, certainly. Not just fair. He's also generous, plenteous in mercy. Don't call him stingy. Don't call him, unmerciful, unfair. Unmerciful, sometimes to those who show no mercy, they shall be judged without mercy. But they shall be judged fairly. Well, he's certainly fair at the very least. He is fair to all. But fair is not good enough to be saved. Fair is condemnation. Unless you're quite a man. Even Job. Job needs God's graciousness. And from the beginning, Job has not denied that. That's why God is not angry. Job has gone a bit far in being more willing to justify himself than God, but he was also not wrong in what he said about God. Because God hasn't denied anything. Yeah, I'll take away your judgment and I'll give it back. It is mine to give and mine to take. It is lawful for me to do what I will with what belongs to me. That is God's attitude. We were in Matthew 20 yesterday to understand that. When the young cry out to God and in wonder for lack of meat, who's going to provide for them? You? When there are, like I said, where no man is, God is there. Who is in the far corners of the universe, making sure it all keeps flowing along? And this is not God of the gaps. It's the fact it all works and it keeps working. And taking that for granted is kind of foolish. Anyways, so that's the end of chapter 38. We'll go on to chapter 39, Lord willing, tomorrow. Until then, remember, the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, and he is the fulfillment of the law.
In the year the King Uzziah died,